Today, Mom and I went to some events for Whitesville's bicentennial celebrations. We in particular left around 7:30 a.m. And we arrived in Whitesville at around 10 in the morning. From what I recall, I was pretty fortunate to wake up in time for Mom and I to leave for Whitesville. Yeah, I didn't get much sleep, but I did get some sleep, as I needed to get up at some point. The most significant thing I did on the car ride to Whitesville was to watch essentially, I literally played the entire Christmas 2021 number 2 video on my smartphone. The same thing I'm using to film this video right now. I played that 39.5-minute video on my phone through the YouTube app because I urgently needed to delete those raw videos finally in order to make some space to be able to make and upload U-Cut projects on the backlog of my dinner videos that I needed to upload to YouTube. But before I could delete the raw videos, I first had to make sure that the U-Cut project uploaded properly to YouTube. I haven't encountered any problems with any such videos in a long time. Thankfully, but I just feel the need that it doesn't hurt to check. There were some points in that video that made Mom laugh and smile, such as the point in which she opened the Miranda Lambert polystyrene drawing that I made for her. And another point in which she talked about her experience essentially making gingerbread houses for the first time for Christmas Day. Which involved a pretty funny incident. You know, one of the first things her mom and I did at Whitesville once we got there around 10 in the morning was for us to walk from Grandma's house to actually, as it turns out, the Independence Historical Society. The I stands for Independence, which is the real name of that historical society in Whitesville. I found this out because also during that car ride, I looked up their Facebook page. Thanks to advice from my mom on doing that, as well as how to do that, so that we could see when they were open. Today, it turned out they were pretty much continuously open from 10 in the morning to 5:30 p.m. It's just kind of in shifts from they were 2-hour shifts except for that last one, in which presumably they were time blocks in which different staff members would be available. Before we went in, some photos were taken of me, combinations of me, grandma, and mom, on a bench dedicated to someone on the property outside of the new permanent location of the Independence Historical Society. On the car ride to Whitesville, I wore casual clothes, but then when I got to Grandma's place, I changed into those colonial clothes that Mom got me. Through a seller on Amazon. But right before we got to Grandma's place, we made a stop at a Lowe's. And if I recall correctly, Hornell, so that we could buy Grandma a carbon monoxide detector, as well as batteries for that detector. And then the very first thing that happened when we got there at Grandma's place was for Mom to install that carbon monoxide detector. Once we went into the Independence Historical Society, I had the IHS styrofoam drawing in a plastic bag. At one point, I took it out and presented it to the two older female staff members that were the only staff there at the time. Stated my intentions of donating the drawing that I made, and then they happily accepted it. I just made the offer to another older female staff member who wasn't there at the time of the actual donation, but I made the offer because I wanted to create a polystyrene drawing that the residents of Whitesville would get to look at as they looked at the other historical stuff. The historical stuff in the Independence Historical Society. The next thing we did was to make a stop at the Whitesville grocery store. But it's not really a grocery store, it's kind of more like a convenience store. We made a stop there because we were told by one of the older female staff members at the Independence Historical Society of a crafts show essentially in the same vein as the Emerging Artist Expo I was part of last month, in which there's vendors with vendors in tents selling presumably goods they made themselves, although I'm not entirely sure if they might have truly made some of that stuff, but I don't know if all of that stuff they made themselves. There were t-shirts, jewelry, koozies, keychains. There was just one row, column, one vertical line of about 5 or so tents. And yet there was so much variety in the goods. At that crafts show, I met an older woman in person who I'm familiar with through her Facebook account. Had a pretty good conversation while Mom and Grandma looked at the stuff. Although they didn't buy anything until the time we came back. I'm thinking maybe that was around 3:30 p.m. or possibly later, in which Mom bought 3 bicentennial coffee mugs and a t-shirt, if I recall correctly. After our first stop at that crafts show, then was the time for us to go to wait in line at the fire station, the fire department building, so that we could buy some chicken dinners in styrofoam containers. We got a total of 3, one for each of us. The chicken dinners consisted of a big piece of chicken with the following sides of mac salad, baked beans, and a dinner roll with some butter, which came pre-melted. You didn't really need a knife, but chicken dinners came with white plastic silverware, rendering the real silverware that was left on Grandma's dining room table irrelevant. I ate everything of that chicken dinner since it was a special occasion. after having those after having that chicken dinner, I recall ending up falling asleep from roughly either 1 p.m. or from 2 p.m. to about 3 to 3:30 p.m. This was because in the early afternoon I ended up feeling an overwhelming sense of tiredness, to the point where even though I couldn't lie down on either the bedroom bed or any of the living room couches or the couch in the den room, and instead within the den room I sat on a rocking chair, I still managed to fall asleep. During that time. So, right before we waited in line for our chicken dinners, we went to a nearby car show that they were still having right before noon, in which we got to look at and take pictures of old cars, essentially. Either old or otherwise interesting cars to look at. The time between 4 p.m. and roughly 6 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. 5:30 p.m. being the time we went out with essentially folding chairs or / lawn chairs. Mom and I had 2 foldable lawn chairs. One purple, one red. I sat in the purple one. For Grandma, we got one of her foldable patio chairs and brought these chairs out to a nearby street corner on Main Street where the parade would go through. The purple and red lawn chairs was something that I think Mom and I bought at Wegmans the other day, according to my recollection. Anyway, from 4 to 5:30 p.m. was a period of essentially walking around Whitesville looking at stuff, including happening to come across a donation drive that Reefs Across America, a nonprofit organization that seeks to celebrate America's veterans, their donation drive included an old car from the 1920s, if I recall correctly, that had been tricked out with a hillbilly theme. Having a broom, a washboard, a bucket that says Grandma's Roadkill Stew, stuff like that. I had first seen it at that car show and at least briefly wondered why it had all those names on it. Turns out if you can donate $5, you can sign your name on the leather or otherwise black or dark colored parts of the car using a metallic silver Sharpie marker and this sort of template that's provided so you can write down your name and state. The first time we came across that donation drive by happenstance, Mom paid $10 so that both she and I could sign our names on that car, and then later we made another trip so we could also donate and sign Jim Fitzpatrick name onto the car because he's a veteran. And one of our former family members. And then I think Mom paid for another name to be signed on there. I'm not entirely sure who it was. I just thought I heard about Mom paying for donations for having a name signed on to the car. During our walking around in that period, it turned out it turns out the town/village of Whitesville has a pretty big setup when it comes to all the events they have planned for the bicentennial. The area around Main Street or so, and it kind of ended up looking like a carnival, as I commented at one point. Right before we watched and took photos/video of the parade, we had a photo op at the Queensdental jail presumably something that was built for their 150-year anniversary. And as a matter of fact, inside of that quintessential jail was a sort of cardboard cutout where you can make yourself look like a prisoner. Both Mom and then I went inside of that jail for the photo op. For the parade they had on Main Street, and was the reason for a temporary no parking police order for Main Street. Where you would usually be able to park your car on Main Street from 3 to 8 p.m. They threw out quite a bit of candy. To the point where some of it landed right at Mom and I, because some people at one point sat next to us in foldable lawn chairs of their own on our corner with some little kids. Whenever I got a piece of candy, I would just give it to essentially our neighbors that were to the left of me and us on that corner, to maybe either they could have it or they could give it to the little kids, because I didn't really want to have any candy, because I was trying to stick to a keto diet, despite having some parts of that chicken dinner earlier, and then later as one of the last things we did before we headed off for home. And around maybe 9:40 p.m., Mom and I stopped off at that maple syrup stand that we at one point visited in the period from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., which was the period right before we sat down to watch that parade. We went to that maple syrup stand where I saw they were selling vanilla ice cream. I got the large cone at 9:40 p.m. and that was why I had wanted to go to that maple syrup stand, since I figured it's a special occasion, and so I may as well live a little. Essentially take part in the celebration have some of what all the different outside tented stands were offering, so to speak. Anyway, for the parade itself, they had some pretty creative floats. One of which involved some of the surviving candidates for quintessential queen, meaning they were probably either high school or college age in the 1970s. At one point, I think the Living Waters float flew towards me this tract, which originally had inside this area a sour punch that I again gave to the people that were to the left of us on the corner, since at that time I didn't want any candy, since I wanted to try to stick to a keto diet. It kind of starts off seeming like it's going to be something that's going to test your memory. And then it opens up into this, which to be fair, memorizing the Ten Commandments does take some level of memory. But considering we're predominantly a Christian nation, meaning out of all the different religions people in this country can practice, the largest religious groups belong to sects of Christianity. For the same reason, India is predominantly a Hindu nation and Israel is predominantly a Jewish nation. You would probably have to be living under a rock to not be aware of the Ten Commandments here in the United States. I decided to keep that tract because to keep it as a memento for the fact that Mom and I attended the bicentennial events for Whitesville. After the parade, when we got back to Grandma's house, I finally had some time where I could work on the styrofoam drawing project that I had brought with me, along with my marker satchel. In this case, I brought along with me the Ladybug Mucha Libre female wrestler, during which I carefully outlined the text on the front of her wrestling top, and then started the coloring and detailing for the front of her yoga pants. After some touching up and drawing in details regarding outlines for her top. Specifically where her breasts end within the top. Essentially just doing those outlines to put in those details using a black fine-tipped Sharpie marker. Around 9 p.m., Mom and I went out into Whitesville in order to listen to a live band performance in preparation for the fireworks to start at 10 p.m. But I think they ended up starting those fireworks about 15 or so minutes early. I took a picture of the live band as they did covers of songs. Such as Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars. Among others, and then I took pictures of the fireworks while Mom took video of the fireworks show. We then headed for the car to head for home at around 10:04 p.m. I got my large cone vanilla ice cream at around 9:40 or so p.m. with 2 scoops of vanilla. Ate that within a few minutes or so. And then we stayed a little longer for the live band, whose name wasn't really provided. And then on the car ride home, because I only got a couple to a few hours of sleep in the afternoon, I ended up getting exhausted again and fell asleep within 15 to 20 minutes of the car ride back home starting. And by the time I woke back up, we were within minutes, 15 minutes or so of arriving back home.